Hello YouTube, this is Goddard Radio Moscow here again with another beer review. Now this is a very special beer review for you today in my opinion. This is the beer that really sent me on the downward spiral towards becoming a beer geek. I visited the brewhouse in Bamberg for this one with my good friend Daniel, who lives there, so I have to say a big thank you to him for enlightening me to the world of beer. I was never really into beer before I tried this one, but today I have for you the Brauerei Bamberg's Aecht Schlenkerla Rauchbier Märzen variety, and as I say, this is a very special beer to me, and I'm very proud to be able to do the beer review of this one for you. But as is usual with my beer reviews, I'll just tell you a little bit about the history of the brewery here. But if you are simply just interested in the tasting of this beer, then feel free just to fast forward towards the last few minutes of the video and you will catch that particular segment. But this is a very famous beer, really well known throughout Germany, and it's available throughout the world as well. Definitely pick this one up if you get the chance to. But anyway, let's get on with the history of this brewery. Now, the Schlenkerla Brewery is located in the historic town of Bamberg in Germany, which is just to the northwest of Nuremberg. If you're wondering exactly what region we're talking about in Germany, you have Berlin obviously in the sort of northeast of Germany, and then you have Munich in the south, sort of southeastish corner of Bavaria, and Nuremberg is sort of pretty much bang in the middle of these two, and then the city of Bamberg is just to the northwest of this particular city of Nuremberg. But Bamberg is very cool. I mean, it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and it largely went untouched during the war, but there's a lot of really beautiful churches and cathedrals in this city that you can just walk around and take a look at. It's really worth the trip to go there if you are in Germany, and there's a lot of wineries and things like that as well. It seems to be the case that in Germany the monasteries spent a lot of time just either brewing beer or brewing wine and stuff like that, which is always really cool. But the brewhouse for this particular brewery is right in the centre of the old town, and as I said, it's very famous and well known throughout Germany and indeed the world as well. The brewhouse is on a street called Dominikanerstrasse in the city, and the brewhouse was actually originally neighboured by a Dominican monastery, and the history of this tavern actually started with the formation of the Dominican monastery in the 14th century. The first mention of the brewery is in the year 1405, and the brewhouse building was apparently sold a number of times between 1405 and 1615, and during the 30 Years' War, which was 1618 to 1648, the building was actually destroyed and then rebuilt. But the brewery itself was officially founded in 1678, but before this year the documentation and the reports of the actual existence of the brewery are rather scarce. However, after this year the documentation is far more comprehensive and there's a lot more information available. But since 1678 there have been numerous owners of the brewery. One of the very important owners was Johann Wolfgang Heller, and this is obviously where the Brauerei Heller name comes from, but he took control of the brewery in the mid-18th century. And he owned an old rock cellar for beer storage up on the Kalberg Hill, which is just outside of the city of Bamberg. But this storage facility was later moved to the Stephansberg Hill. Berg incidentally just means hill in German, but this was moved to the Stephansberg Hill, which is actually inside of the city limits today. But over the course of the 19th and 20th centuries, the brewery was gradually moved to the location just above these ancient cellars of Stephansberg. And in 1877, Andreas Grasser became the new owner of the brewery, and he had a slight physical handicap, which meant that his arms moved in a very odd manner when he walked around. But the Franconian dialect for this was called Schlenkern, and soon after this people began to refer to the brewery as Schlenkerla, despite the official name of the brewery being Hellerbrau. So this is where the name Schlenkerla comes from. It's quite an interesting story behind this brewery. But in 1907, Andreas' son Michael took over the running of the brewery, but by this time more and more people were visiting the brewery, and they had actually leased a part of the former monastery from the Bavarian government, who had become the owners of this particular building of the monastery during the course of secularization. This was similar in the case of the Weihenstephan brewery when I did my reviews for that one. But in the 1920s, the buildings of the Dominikanerklasse, which was this is referring to the chapel of this Dominican monastery that the brewery was attached to, these were being restored by the Germanic Museum of Nuremberg in 1920. And in 1960, this restored part of the tavern was actually bought from the government by the Schlenkerla company, and then Michael Grasser's daughter Elizabeth and then her husband Jakob Trum took over the running of the brewery. And in 1967, they passed the brewery down to their son German. And over the years since then, they've modernised their brewing facilities, and they've opened new rooms within the Brauhaus, and they've added a beer garden in what was the former yard of the Dominican monastery. But in very recent years, they've they've restored the facade of the Brauhaus, and the famous historic ceiling painting within the monastery has also been restored itself. I highly recommend that you go and take a little look at the Brauhaus. It's really beautiful inside. You go in and there's all these really old hardwood tables and stuff like that. You have the sort of dark wood beams across the ceiling. It's a very, very Germanic little looking building. It really is worth the travel. I mean, if you go to Bamberg, one of the first things taxi drivers will say to you, oh, do you want to visit Schlenkerla? You know, you have to go and try this brewery. It's a really, really unique brewery. You know, it's one of these things, you just have to do it. But anyway, the other Schlenkerla beers include, in the Rauchbier range, they obviously have this one, the Märzen, which as you can see has the brown trim around the label. We have the Weizen, which is a similar label to this one but has a green trim around it. They all have different bottle caps as well. And you also have the Urbock, which has a red trim around the label, although I've seen these having a silver trim around the label as well. But it's actually a very difficult beer to get a hold of, the Urbock. I'm not quite sure why. They also have the Aecht, which is a Doppelbock. I really want to try this one. This has a dark green label as well. And they also have the Lager beer, which is a Munich style Helles beer. And I have the Lager beer and the Weizen variety of the Rauchbier that I will review for you in the next wee while. But anyway, let's just get on to the tasting of this particular beer itself. This one is a 5.1% Märzen Rauchbier. This really is the benchmark of the style. I mean, this is, as I said, this is a very, very famous beer, and there's not many that can top this one and for the style, in my opinion, if any, to be honest. As I say, as Weihenstephan is the benchmark for Weiss beers, this is the benchmark for smoked beers and things like that. It's a really wonderful brewery. I really love this one. I'll just let you have a little look at the label for this one, as you can see it on the camera there. It's a really nice sort of old style label on this one here. I believe, if I am remembering correctly, the little thing on the top of the brewery here is the Rathaus, the townhouse. I always find it quite funny that the Germans call their sort of townhouse the Rathaus. It reminds me much of the integrity of politicians, you know. As you can see, the bottle cap has the same seal on it as you get on the label down here. It has a little description on the back actually. It says the Schlenkerla is situated in the UNESCO World Heritage City of Bamberg in Bavaria, Germany. First mentioned in the year 1405, this historic brewery tavern has been the source of Aecht Schlenkerla Rauchbier for centuries. Following the most ancient brewing and malting traditions, selected barley is malted with the brewery and kilned over a fire of beechwood logs. The smoked malt, finest Bavarian hops and pure water are the only ingredients of this unique beer. Original Schlenkerla smoke beer is dark, bottom fermented beer with an intense smoky aroma and flavour. A really good description of it actually. For those of you wondering, this is a half-litre bottle, standard in Germany. It's a 5.1% Rauch beer, as you would expect, Märzen variety, or Märzen, sorry. So let's get this guy open and get on with the tasting of this one. I'm really pleased to be able to do the beer review of this one. As I said, I'll just preserve the bottle cap of this one as I like to do with my ones. This is going a little bit crazy. Yeah, that went a little bit mental. I wasn't expecting that. Yeah. Let's just get this guy out before it goes any more crazy. I don't know why it quite flared up like that, but anyway, doesn't matter. Let's just get this guy out. Okay. That's the third beer that's done that to me this time. As you can see, there's a really beautiful bit of head on this one. Beer's all wet now. But anyway, as you can see, it's a really, really beautiful dark mahogany colour. There is, if you hold it up to the light, there's a sort of red winey tint to this one. There's not much visible in the way of carbonation, and I remember this beer being quite flat in that sense. In terms of the aroma, you're getting off of it. The aroma, it's very, very rich malts, really, really dark smokiness. It's almost peaty actually, but it's very meaty. It smells a lot like bacon, this one, but you can smell the barley and the hops in there. There's some really kind of sort of dark malt, woody notes in there, I would say. There's also just a little hint of caramel sweetness, but the overriding smell of this one is the sort of bacon smoky malts on this one. Really, really unique smelling beer. I could sit and smell this all day. The head on this one I never mentioned, that's about 2 fingers of the head, but it's very, very frothy, typical of German beers. There are some slightly bigger bubbles in there, but it's mainly a frothy head. I'm a bit annoyed that that blew up on me there accidentally, but oh well, what can you do? Anyway, let's give this guy a taste. This is a very historic beer, so I'll savour this one. As I say, there's not so much flavour in this one at the start. It's really in the middle, and at the end you get the smokiness out of this beer. Yeah, you take it in and it doesn't have so much flavour to it, but then the flavour sort of builds itself up and you get the really, really very smoky malty flavour. It's actually, as I mentioned with the aroma, it's very, very meaty that you get the flavour of it. It actually is really like bacon, maybe a little bit like barbecue actually. But you can pick up the hops at the end and that balances it out really quite well. There is a lot of woody element to it as well. I'm not so much picking up the caramel. The overriding thing is the smoky malt flavour, and it's a really, really unique style of beer. This is one you really have to try for yourself. I can sit and describe it for you, but you won't really understand what I'm going on about until you try it for yourself. But yeah, this beer is, in terms of the mouthfeel, this one is very, very full-bodied, I would say. There's not much in the way of carbonation. It is actually quite a flat beer, and it's very, very smooth, I would say. And I would say it's actually very, very clean as well. This is a really, really unique beer in that sense. As I say, you really need to try it yourself, but you know, it doesn't have much of carbonation in it. It's very smooth. It's a beer actually that would be very ideal for, you know, a red meat roast dinner, and it's a tasting beer rather than a session beer, one that you simply have to try given the chance. As I say, very, very historic and well-known brewery in Germany. It's a really beautiful beer. This is where it all started for me. I absolutely adore this beer. If you really are into the sort of smoky styles of beer though, I've heard that the Doppelbock and the Urbock are actually a hell of a lot smokier than this, but when you try this you'll think, geez, that is really, really smoky. But you have to, you really have to try it. Give all the beers in the range a try if you have. I've not tried the Weizen yet, or the lager beer. I'm really interested to see what they're like. This is the only one I've had before, but this is really, really nice. But as I say, a brewery that you really have to give a chance to. Very, very historic. A beer that is ideal for sitting by a proper fire, or for eating with a roast dinner. Really, really unique and interesting brewery. But I hope my beer review has been informative for you. I hope that I don't get many more that kind of explode on me in the way that this one did. But thanks again for watching. Please comment in the comment section and let me know your own thoughts on this beer. As I say, it's one of my favourites, so I'm always interested to hear what other people think of it. As I say, I've heard the Doppelbock and the Urbock are a lot smokier than this one, but this is really cool in itself. But thanks again for watching. You've been Goddard Radio Moscow. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel, and like, share, subscribe, all the usual YouTube jazz. You've been watching Goddard Radio Moscow, and I'll catch you soon. Cheers.